Hola, 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 muchachos. ¿Qué tal? Hey, it's time for heroes. Oh, God, that was embarrassing, wasn't it? Never mind. Ah, well. Hi, hello, everyone. Hope you're all well. And let's crack on with heroes. So, uh, as we saw yesterday, Francis has met Arthur Riviere and come into the social club. He's met other ex-servicemen, so we've seen some things about the horrors of war. We saw his nightmares about killing the German soldiers, and he did kill the German soldiers. Um, we met Larry LaSalle, who is doing really good work with the kids in the rec centre. So again, why is it that they now know he wants to kill him? Good morning, Miss Tompkins. Just saw your message. I only saw this morning your messages about being late for the last 2 days. But don't worry, you are forgiven. And it can be seen on catch up on Facebook and eventually on YouTube. I haven't put yesterday's up yet on YouTube, and I hope your dog as well. So Francis is going to the rec centre. Nicole is going to the rec centre, so that makes it a sort of special little place. Remember that horrible, chilling bit at the end yesterday, where there was like a throwaway sentence that makes it more horrible. I think that Joey LeBlanc died in Iwo Jima, and that the way it was done, like just like a casual comment, made it more horrific. Almost like, yeah, well, that's just normal. That's just how it was then. It's horrible, isn't it? Okay, so I've remembered my water this time, so let's crack on. And we are now in the sort of present, so it's after the war. I've been in Frenchtown almost a month now, and March has turned into April, but the clouds are still thick and low, and rain falls almost every day. I walk the streets, and people begin to nod at me, or greet me with a smile, because I've become a familiar figure. My army fatigue jacket tells them I'm a veteran, and this is a season when all the veterans are welcome everywhere. Lingering in front of stores, standing on the front steps of St. Jude's Church at the corner of 3rd and Mechanic, I watch for Larry LaSalle, for that Fred Astaire strut and that movie star smile. I think of the gun in my duffel bag, and I'm impatient for him to come back. He creates a very effective sense, doesn't he, of like tension. Oh, Miss Tompkins saying I need to get louder. I give it a stab. Don't want to do it too much or I'll deafen everybody. The levels are coming through quite high on my setup, but there you go. Let me know if that's okay. He's that builds up the sort of tension, the sense of waiting for the drama to happen, to waiting for the climactic moment of Larry LaSalle appearing. It does that well, doesn't it? It keeps building up, building up, building up, tells us the story as it goes along, and you're thinking, what is going on and what will happen when they come across him. Could I also quickly mention a little, is it a cheap trick by writers? Pathetic fallacy. Pathetic fallacy is when a writer matches something like, say, the, oh, good stuff, Miss Tompkins, matches something like the weather to the mood. It's a, I would argue, possibly slightly cheap trick, although it can work very well. So here we have, it's grim, isn't it? He's waiting and waiting, and he has no face, and everything's horrible, and so the weather is grim. You will see other bits of pathetic fallacy in this as well, where the weather is used. Think back. Actually, I just realised if you're year 9, you haven't done this yet. So Romeo and Juliet, there's a very tense scene and it's boiling hot. So everybody's really wound up because it's so hot, everyone's restless. Okay, sorry, I'll carry on. Oh no, I won't. I'll say one more quick thing. I don't know if you noticed, the church is called St. Jude's Church in that last paragraph, and in a moment you'll see again the club where the soldiers go, and it's St. Jude's Club. St. Jude, might they pick St. Jude? Well, might I argue, because St. Jude is the saint of lost causes, is how they often say it, like the saint of the hopeless and the despairing. So, well, that feels like how Francis is, doesn't it? It also probably feels like how a lot of the people are after the war. So That's, again, not an accident they chose that saint. Anyway, carry on. I sometimes stand in front of the convent and wonder whether the mystery of what has happened to Nicole is hidden within those walls. The veterans in the St. Jude Club always greet me with big hellos and slaps on the back, and make room for me at the bar or in the crowd watching a close game of pool. They respect my silence and my anonymity. The talk now is of the new Chevys and Fords coming from the Detroit factories, and the freedom of walking down 3rd Street without saluting an officer and wearing civvies instead of uniforms. Civvies, civilian clothes, normal clothes. Arthur and Armand and Joe are always there, fixtures in the club until they become cops or firemen or go to college or back to the shops. But this is the pause between one life and another, and they drink beer and wine and shoot pool and talk. Always the talk, reminiscing about the days before the war, the nuns at St. Jude's, the long sermons of Father Balthazar, the ball games in Cartier's Field, and the mystery of the stranger visiting Frenchtown one summer years ago, who hit a home run in almost every game, and who many thought was a Major League player in disguise, Babe Ruth maybe, or Lou Gehrig. Oh, I'm going to interrupt myself again there, sorry, just to say firstly, ooh, it's a bit creepy, isn't it? That sent paragraph feels a bit like what we're in now. That sent paragraph about this is the pause between one life and another. Oh gosh, it's quite eerie, that, isn't it? That bit at the end about baseball, yeah, those are two of the legendary baseball players, Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig. I feel I want to bore you with this, not as if I'd ever go off topic in lessons. Babe Ruth is, some people would argue the great baseball player, an amazing player, apparently not a nice bloke. But the big thing is that he played for Boston Red Sox, and we saw, didn't we, that Boston Red Sox, that's the baseball cap that Francis is wearing. Now, lost causes and things like that. Here's another theme. Boston Red Sox, when baseball started, were the #1 team. They won the World Series 5 times in the first 15 years. They were the first champions, so they were the great team. And Babe Ruth played for them. And then, amazingly, they sold him to New York Yankees, who were not a good team. What happens? New York Yankees with Babe Ruth become the best team, and Boston just can't win the World Series anymore. And it's they call it the curse of the Bambino. Bambino is one of Babe Ruth's nicknames. That because they sold Babe Ruth, they can never win the World Series. So they won it in 1918. They sold Babe Ruth in 1919, and they didn't win it until 2004. So again, a sort of hard luck story. He supports the Boston Red Sox. The Red Sox are an unhappy team. And then Lou Gehrig is a deliberate choice as well, because Lou Gehrig was also a Yankees player from a little bit later than Babe Ruth. And, well, somewhat horribly ironic, really. He was brilliant and was also seen as like indestructible. He set the record. He didn't miss a game. And remember, in baseball they play lots of games. They play like every day, for much of the season. He didn't miss a game for years and years and years. He was always there, never injured. But he retired and made a very famous emotional speech on the pitch to the crowd, because he'd contracted a disease that was pretty rare at the time. People couldn't quite work out what it was, and they called it Lou Gehrig's disease. It's oh gosh, I always forget the initials mixed up in this. But it's the one that, remember the Ice Bucket Challenge? It's that disease. ADL? AS? Oh, I'm sorry, I can't remember. So again, maybe that's another thing about heroes. He looked to be the indestructible hero, but he sadly had the flaw. Babe Ruth, apart from the fact of Boston Red Sox being a doomed team, Babe Ruth, the superstar, who is also flawed because he's not a nice fella. Interesting. I don't think it's coincidence he picked those. Anyway, I've only read half a page. I need to crack on, don't I? Sorry. I let my glass of beer grow stale and flat on the bar, because I want to remain sharp and alert at all times in case Larry LaSalle should walk in, or someone might mention his name. The old strangler lets me nurse my beer, and doesn't mind if I don't order another. He's the bartender, the sweeper, and the settler of arguments. Arthur says he used to wrestle in the carnivals that came to Frenchtown, taking on the travelling champion who challenged local wrestlers. He was famous for his stranglehold, which paralysed his opponents. His voice is hoarse from the time, Arthur says, that he was hit in the Adam's apple by a carnival champ who was losing the match. His hair is sparse and grey, but his eyes are clear and watchful, and his muscles bulge under the white shirt, his bow tie moving when he talks. There always comes a moment when a sudden quiet falls in the club, as if everyone's become weary, and yet it's too early to go home. The jukebox too is silent. I watch and see things. I see the twitching in the corner of Arthur's mouth, the way his lips seem tugged by invisible fingers. Armand stares off into space, looking at something nobody else can see, and there's a sudden flash of, what? Terror? Bad dreams in his eyes. As I turn away, I see Georges Richelieu tugging at his pinned-up sleeve, which should hold his arm, but his arm is buried somewhere in the South Pacific, or probably tossed aside into jungle growth, as Arthur muttered one day. It's, again, the horrors of war. They all seem happy, but they're covering up the pain. They're socialising to keep themselves from thinking about the pain. Armand staring off as if he's gone somewhere else. Arthur's lips twitching uncontrollably. And then Georges Richelieu, who's lost an arm. I was going to take my sweater off anyway. I feel a bit warm, so maybe I should illustrate this. When I was a kid, you used to still see the odd old man like this from the war. He's lost an arm. And so what they would do is wear a suit, and then they would pin the sleeve up to the shoulder of the suit like that, so that there was like an empty arm, but the sleeve wasn't flopping around all over the place. So that's what Georges Richelieu has done. And again, just like the casual way it described Joey Leblanc, just dying. His arm's probably been tossed aside into the jungle growth. He's lost his arm. Right, he's lost his arm. Lob her over there. Let's get him into the hospital. Yeah. In the deepening silence, I hear my own voice loud in my ears as I break the mood with the question that's been burning inside me since my arrival in Frenchtown. Has anyone heard when Larry LaSalle's coming back? My voice surprises me, suddenly strong and clear, without the hoarseness. Arthur's eyes are upon me, curious and suspicious. He studies me for a moment, then turns away, raising his glass. To Larry LaSalle, he calls out, the patron saint of the rec centre. I wonder if he's making a joke or being sarcastic, but he nods meaningfully at me, holding his glass high. And to the kids who were lucky to know him, adds Joe Lafontaine, raising his own glass. Everyone joins in, and I'm surprised to see the old strangler pour himself a glass of red wine. I've never seen him drink before. To the Silver Star and the men who wear it, he growls, and to Larry LaSalle, the best of the best. Ooh. So remember we said that Francis had a Silver Star, the second highest possible medal in the American military. Larry LaSalle's got one as well. Let's stop for just a second. What do we know about Larry LaSalle? He looks like a film star. He can do everything. He's amazing. He makes a huge difference to the kids' lives. He's sensitive, brilliantly sensitive, by the way he handled Francis when he was shy in the calisthenics lesson. He's a Silver Star hero. In fact, the Strangler says, to the Silver Star and the men who wear it, and Larry LaSalle, the best of the best. So, what's the question that forms in your head? Why does Francis want to come back and kill him then? Hey, Strangler, still got the scrapbook? Arthur asks. The Strangler sets down his glass, reaches under the bar, and pulls out a big black leather book. Glancing at me, he says, they're all in here. The cover reads, Frenchtown Warriors in white block letters. He riffles through pages of newspaper cuttings and pictures of men and women, all in uniform. He holds his scrapbook up at a double page with headlines, articles, and pictures of Larry LaSalle. The biggest headline at the top of one page proclaims, Lieutenant LaSalle earns Silver Star. There are lots of medals, the big bartender croaks, for outstanding service, but only the silver medal Silver Star is for heroism. His old voice is suddenly formal and dignified. For gallantry. Another headline halfway down the page reads, LaSalle captures enemy, saves fellow Marines. The dancer becomes a hero, Arthur says, then pauses and turns to me. Leaning close, he says, that voice when you asked about Larry LaSalle. Now I know it. You're Francis Cassavant. Final recognition in his eyes. You used to Fetch balls during the games at Cartier's Field, I say, voice low, afraid that my days of being anonymous are over. Oh, this is not what he wants, is it? His eyes widen and he declares, you have your own Silver Star. You're in the Strangler's book too. As he turns to announce my identity, I touch his shoulder. Don't make a fuss, Arthur. Let me stay like this, indicating the scarf and the bandage. You deserve to be recognised, Francis, he whispered. You're a goddamn hero, shaking his head in disbelief. Little Francis Cassavant falls on a grenade and saves... How many men did you save, Francis? How many men were you willing to die for? Lifting the scarf, I sipped the beer, doing something to avoid answering his question. A long moment passes. Okay, you have my respect. If you don't want to talk about it, I won't either. Slapping me on the back. I'd look away from the aberration in his eyes. And I'll keep your secret. The Strangler places the book back under the counter and he swipes at the top of the bar with a damp rag. It's good to know that I don't have to keep adding to the book anymore, he says. Then looking at me and answering my question. Nobody knows when he's coming back, but they all come back to the French town sooner or later. Arthur nudges me. Still whispering, he says. The rec centre, ping pong. You were the champ there at ping pong, right? Table tennis, I correct him. I correct him gently, remembering Lionel LaSalle and my brief moments as the table tennis champion at the rec centre. So again, he leads us into the next bit. Whoa. So Arthur recognises him, but Francis successfully gets him to not tell anybody, saying he wants to keep it like this, yeah? And we know a bit more now about what happened to Francis, don't we? He jumped on a grenade and saved lots of people's lives. But if that's the case, why is it? Remember he said he was disgusted when he was called a hero earlier? And what about his reaction there when Arthur talks about it? Firstly, he takes a sip of beer to not talk about it. And secondly, he looks away from the admiration in Arthur's eyes. He can't stand being called a hero. So again, we've got this odd question here. What is actually going on? Right, okay, flashback now. Back to Francis as a kid before the war in the rec centre. What's the matter? Lionel LaSalle asked. Nothing, I replied. He found me sitting alone on the back steps of the rec centre, looking at nothing in particular. There was nothing in my world that was worth looking at. Inside, the chorus was rehearsing for the Follies and Fancies production, singing Happy Days Are Here Again. The words like a mockery in my ears. I was aware of other kids busy at the craft tables. Must be something, Larry LaSalle said, dropping onto the step beside me. I'm rotten at everything, I confessed. I can't sing, I can't dance, I'm no good at baseball. And I can't even get up the nerve to hold a normal conversation with Nicole Reynard, I added silently. Avoiding his eyes, I was suddenly angry at my self-pity. Snap out of it, I told myself. I've been watching you, Francis. During calisthenics, you have outstanding reflexes. You have a natural athletic gait. He spelled out the word G-A-I-T. I think I have the perfect sport for you. Your gait is how you stand. G-A-I-T rather than G-A-T-E. In spite of my doubts, my interest quickened. Lionel LaSalle's opinion could never be dismissed. Look, today's Tuesday. The centre's closed for renovations for a couple of days to bring in new equipment. Be here Friday afternoon. You're going to be a champion. I'll be here, I promised. Where else would I be? When I arrived at the centre 3 days later, I was surprised to see that the place had been entirely rearranged. A small stage had been built at the far end of the hall and 2 spotlights installed. For the music shows, he explained. A vending machine stood near the entrance. 2 ping-pong tables occupied spaces near the side windows, looking out on 3rd Street. Leading me to the nearest table, he picked up the white plastic ball and bounced it a few times. Ping-pong, I said, hoping my voice didn't betray my disappointment. Table tennis, he said. Ping-pong is a game. Table tennis is a sport. Known around the world, it's a sport you're going to dominate with your quickness and your reflexes. Pointing to 2 paddles on the table, he said, let's get going. Showing me how to stand, alert, leaning forwards, knees bent slightly, paddle in my right hand, level of my belt. Going to the opposite side of the table, he hit the ball to me. I swung the paddle, struck the ball with a satisfying plop, and watched it sail cleanly over the net. The ball returned, I hit it again, bounced on his side and returned to mine. Bounce and return again. Suddenly the ball arrived, but squirted crazily to my right. Instantly alert, I managed to hit it with the paddle, saw it fly just as crazily across the net. Beautiful, Larry LaSalle called. You returned to spin. We played for almost an hour as kids gathered to watch this new sport. Sweat pasted my shirt to my body and glued the racket to my hand. I missed some shots, particularly the balls of spin, which made them go wildly askew, but returned most of them. The crowd often cheered Larry LaSalle, and once or twice a cheer went up when I made a lunging return. Nobody had ever cheered me before. Finally, he threw down the paddle, called a halt, and led me to the new vending machine, where he bought me a Coke. Congratulations, Francis, he said, raising his bottle in the toast. You're a natural. Besides the reflexes, you have what I call sweet anticipation. It's what natural athletes have, anticipating where the ball will land, whether it's baseball, football, or table tennis. I stood spellbound by his words. You also have a great return. That's the key, Francis. Let the other players make the move, put on the spin, kill the ball. You just keep returning it, good and steady. Your opponent will get frustrated, careless, make a mistake. He gulped down his Coke in one long swallow. Tomorrow I'll teach you the chop on defense and the spin on offense. Just as he'd lured awkward girls into ballet classes and ball players and bullies into being singers and dancers, so did he bring a sudden importance to table tennis. He gave lessons tirelessly, arranged contests, encouraged girls to take up the sport. I spent hours at the tables playing game after game, sharpening my chops and spins, but focusing mostly on returns, trying to stay loose, flowing with the ball. My opponents often became frustrated, as Larry LaSalle predicted, their faces turning scarlet with anger, while I stayed calm and composed, waiting for a mistake to be made. I didn't develop a spectacular kill shot like Joey LeBlanc. My spins were not as sharp as those of Louis Arabelle, who played with a smoothness that was deceptive. He stroked the balls almost lazily, but they took unpredictable trajectories, never landing where they were expected. Yet I won my fair share of games, and sometimes rang up a series of victories. I often searched for Nicole among the spectators, especially if I was having a fine game, but she was seldom present. One afternoon, as I defeated Joey LeBlanc with 5 successive points that left him speechless for once, I turned to find her eyes on me. She brought her hand to her lips and flung it away. Astonished, I wondered, did she actually blow me a kiss? Impossible. Or was it? The paddle slipped from my hand and dropped to the table. I looked up again. She was gone. Ooh, gosh. So again, the impression we're building up of Larry LaSalle is fantastic, isn't he? Look what he's doing for Francis here. I mean, what talent to spot the potential for him, and then he's brought all the table tennis tables in to help him and build up his self-confidence. Wow, that was remarkable. So again, why do you want to kill him when clearly he's an inspiration? Okay, let's read a bit more. In the dance classes, Nicole was the most talented of all, her slender body dipping and turning without effort, as if her bones were elastic. Jealousy streaked through me as Larry LaSalle tossed her in the air, letting her fly, defying gravity for a breathless moment, then caught her, pressing her close, their faces almost touching, their lips only an inch or so from a kiss before he allowed her to slip down against his body. He applauded her, his eyes looking deeply into hers, as she lay at his feet. For the December production, he built an entire number around her and a song called Dancing in the Dark. She glided in and out of shadows as the music played on a phonograph, and Larry LaSalle manipulated a spotlight he'd installed, especially for her performance. He continued to give me extra lessons at the table, and we played countless games against each other. His eyes shone with admiration when I made an unusual shot. My ambition for you, Francis, he said, is to have you beat me. But he always won, with an array of attacks and returns that seemed effortless but always found their mark. Can I just say, Remember at the start, Francis sees Nicole like a saint, a sort of epitome of purity. And yesterday we saw him say his view of her had changed a little. She reminded him of women in magazines that made him feel a certain way. And now we have this description here of her dancing with Larry. And he sees her now in a much more sort of physical way and sexual way, doesn't he? Jealousy streaks through him when he sees that he presses her close to him. The face is almost touching, the lips only an inch apart. He's starting to see her in a different way, isn't he? He's growing up. As the first weekend of December approached, excitement ran high through the rec centre when Lila LaSalle announced a double header. A table tennis tournament on Saturday to be followed by the musical show Follies and Fancies on Sunday. Nicole's the star on Sunday, and I want you to be the star on Saturday, Larry LaSalle said. I'm not supposed to play favourites, Francis, but you and Nicole are special to me. I wondered if he suspected my secret love for her. When I arrived at the rec centre on Saturday, kids had gathered around a silver trophy shaped like a player poised to serve the ball. I pictured Nicole handing me the trophy while I accepted it with the modesty of a true champion. Oh, Sophie, how old is Larry LaSalle supposed to be? Okay, it's not made clear, but these are young kids, what? Early teens, 15, 14, something like that by this point. And Larry LaSalle is a grown man. He's already, as we know, had a career on Broadway as a performer. That doesn't happen to teenagers. He's had that. There's then this mysterious thing about there being some sort of scandal, which we don't know anything about. And then he's had come back. So time has passed. I mean, the guy must be 30-ish. I would have thought, around that. So, Sorry, lost my place. That's it. I was not scheduled to play until the afternoon through an elaborate system Larry LaSalle had devised to allow the ordinary players to eliminate themselves. The better players, like Louis Arabelle, Joey LeBlanc and me, were reserved to take on the morning's winners. As the centre echoed with the sound of bouncing balls and the whoops and applause of the spectators, I became restless and nervous. Suppose my spins and chops deserted me? What if my returns veered off the table? Staring out the window, I sensed a presence nearby, a sudden disturbance in the air, and at the same time the drift of a delicate scent that I associated with Nicole Reynard. He's got this... He builds a sense of mystery around her, doesn't he? He'll see her and then she disappears, or he becomes aware of her presence before he sees her. The scent, I mean, he's describing her smell more now, isn't he? And I think that again is showing that he's seeing her in a different way, in a more adult way. Good luck, Francis. I turned to find her there, speechless as always in her company. I managed a stupid smile. Aww. I love to watch you dance, I blurted out the words, surprising myself with my ability to say such a thing. Maybe I exaggerated that a bit too much. And I love to watch you play, she said. You do? Disbelief cracked my voice. You play table tennis like a dancer dances, the way you move, the way you hit the ball. Sometimes I hum a song watching you play. It's like you're dancing to that song. For the first time in my life, a tide of confidence swept through me. I'm having a party after the show tomorrow afternoon at my house. Larry says that's what people in show business do. Will you come, Francis? Her words filled me with both delight and agony. Delight at her invitation and the instant agony of jealousy. The way she'd casually said his name. Not Larry LaSalle, or Mr. LaSalle as all the kids referred to him, but Larry. Spoken offhand, as if they were more than teacher and pupil. Our conversation was interrupted by the announcement that the semi-final contests were about to begin. Nicole touched my shoulder, her hand both tender and caressing. My flesh burned with the echo of her touch. Good luck, she says. She is much more confident than him, isn't she? 2 hours later, I'd survived more games than I could count. Time passing in a blur as the ball zoomed back and forth across the table. Serve and return, spin and chop, the kill shot and the soft shot. My opponents went down in rapid succession. Finally, Joey LeBlanc, who was having a bad day with the serves, lost by a wide margin, 21-12, and went off muttering to himself. Never before had I known such a sense of destiny. I felt invincible, impossible to defeat, the ball always under my control. Larry's given him that. Larry's wonderful. It's amazing how he's given him that. So why does he want to kill him? The spectators often cheered, gasped at a spectacular shot, either by me or by an opponent, and fell silent when the outcome of a contest seemed in doubt. But I knew no doubt. Between games, my eyes sought Nicole and often spotted her, smiling encouragement. The centre seemed vacant when I looked and did not see her. Louis Arabelle also had been winning contest after contest at the other table, drawing his own cheers and applause. We glanced at each other between games and exchanged grins. It seemed inevitable that we would meet in the final contest of the day. Each time I heard a burst of applause from the next table, I knew that Louis had scored another spectacular point. Finally, Louis and me, standing across the table from each other, both of us undefeated. Louis, tall and rangy, with long arms and legs, ready to play his deceptive game, never tense, never hurrying. I prepared myself for his soft strokes and dazzling spins and chops. Louis took 5 quick points with his first round of serves, catching me off balance with the casual way he raised his paddle and the ferocity of the ball as it arrowed over the net towards me. A hush fell over the crowd. I didn't panic. Told myself to relax. This was a day in which I could not lose. My own 5 serves sent the game into a tie, and after that I simply planted myself 6 feet from the table and concentrated on the return. Louis lost 3 points in a row, and for the first time I saw him flushed with frustration, trying harder, frowning, and finally making mistakes. I reached 21 points to his 18 by simply playing the game like Lasal had told me, being patient, remaining cool and composed while Louis pressed harder. As he missed his last remaining shot, which gave me the victory, a shout went up from the crowd, followed by cheers and whistles and the stomping of feet. I turned, flushed with triumph, my heart beating furiously, blood pumping joyously in my veins. I saw Larry Lasal coming through the crowd, holding the trophy high above his head. Saw Nicole beside him, her eyes on me, shining for me. Like a dream coming true, Nicole took the trophy from Larry Lasal and handed it to me, the radiance of her face mirroring my own. If I can just press pause for 1 second here. I know we've just gone past 11. I'll just finish this section. It's important to finish this section, I think. There's not that much more to it. But just a couple of little points here. Think about it. He's had this great victory, and we can see the wonderful effects that Larry Lasal's had on him by setting it all up for him, essentially. Don't you think it was not that well written, perhaps? I don't say not badly written, but for such a dramatic and major and wonderful moment, there was no tension in it, was there? He said quite early on, I knew I was going to win it. You know? This was a day in which I could not lose. So there's no tension or drama to it. It's quite a matter-of-fact description. There's not much detail in it at all. So, didn't even describe the last point. That seems odd to me. So when a writer does something odd, watch out. Because writers don't accidentally do something odd if they're a good writer. There's a reason why this is not the big dramatic moment that it feels like it should be. So why? Well, you'll find out in a moment, because there's another little pointer here, isn't there? Don't know if you listen to the Mice and Men readings. Steinbeck playing with our emotions, giving us wonderful positive moments, and then dropping us back down with a horrible moment. The obvious example, the conversation with Candy, where they think that the farm will come true, the dream will come true, which is immediately followed by the fight with Lenny and Curly, which makes us think everything's going to go wrong. So raising us up emotionally, dropping us down. Oh, here we are. This incredible moment. Like he says, it's like a dream coming true. He dreamed before the tournament of Nicole giving him the trophy at the end. He's the champion and his girl gives him the trophy. Or the girl he wants to be his girl. And that's what happened. How could life be better? Well, we've just been built up emotionally. That anticlimax of the tournament. Something's coming, isn't it? The crowd grew silent and I pressed the trophy to my chest, my eyes becoming moist. Was I expected to make a speech? Better watch out, Mr. LaSalle, Joey LeBlanc called out. Francis has got your number. Cheers and applause greeted his words, and I wished I could find a way of gagging Joey LeBlanc and keeping his mouth shut. Then a cry rose from the crowd. Larry, Larry, calling him by his first name, finding the courage to do together what no one would do alone. Larry, Larry, cringing inside, my moment of triumph tarnished and trashed. I knew they wanted Larry LaSalle and me to play for the real championship of the rec centre. Then, Francis, Francis, more applause, shouts and whistles, and a voice from the crowd. You can do it, Francis! Larry LaSalle inclined his head toward me, his shoulders raised in resignation as if to say, it's up to you, Francis. How can we say no to the crowd and disappoint them? Suddenly I thought, maybe I can beat him. My play during the afternoon had been almost flawless. Even the game of Louis Arabelle, who was the best of them all, had been an easy win. Like the gamblers in the casino who go on a winning streak. Impossible to lose. Maybe I was on that kind of streak. I nodded towards Larry LaSalle and picked up my paddle, glanced again at Nicole and saw her smile of approval, planted my feet firmly on the floor and took a practice swing. A roar went up from the crowd. Do you see? Something bigger was coming. This is the real game. Him against Larry for what he describes as the real championship of the rec centre. It's nicely written. Remember I said there were lots of long sentences in that terrifying moment when in the army and being attacked in the village in France? Well, here, lots of short sentences because it's just building up the sense of tension. All the gaps between sentences, you have to be quiet, and in that you build up tension as you, the audience, waits to see what will happen next. A roar went up from the crowd. The game began. My serve. Paddle met ball. I didn't try for speed or spin, merely wanted to place the ball in proper position without risk and then play my defensive game. My heartbeat was steady, my body poised for action. The ball came back to me. I returned. Came again, and again I returned. Larry LaSalle's return was placed perfectly at the edge of the table, almost impossible for me to reach, but somehow I reached it, returned it, throwing him off balance. My point. Next point his, then mine again, then his. We were halfway through the game, the score standing at 13-12, my serve, when I realised that he was letting me win. Was guiding the game with such skill that no one but me realised what he was doing. He cleverly missed my returns by what seemed like thousandths of an inch, feigning frustration and placed his returns in seemingly impossible spots, but within my reach. The noise of the crowd proceeded, diminished to a hush, broken only by the plopping of the ball on the table, the soft clunk of the ball and the rubber dimples of our paddles. A giant sigh rose from the crowd when an impressive point was made. I dared not take my eyes away from the game to look at Nicole. Two games were being played at the same time. The sharp take-no-prisoners game the hushed audience was observing, and the subtle, tender game in which Larry LaSalle was letting me win. Finally, the score stood at 20-19. My favour. 1 point away from victory. I resisted meeting Larry LaSalle's eyes. It was still his serve. Crouching, waiting, I finally looked at him, saw his narrowed eyes. They were suddenly inscrutable, mysterious. A shudder made me tremble as I realised that he could easily win the next 2 points and take the championship away from me. He could win it so easily and so humiliatingly that the crowd, Nicole, would know instantly that he'd been toying with me all along. The perfect serve came my way, but my return was perfect. We entered a seesaw cycle, hit and return, repeating endlessly, near misses and lunging stabs. until finally the ball came to my side, a breathtaking shot that veered to the table's edge, causing the crowd to gasp, although he and I knew that it was within my reach. His final gift to me. Lunging, I returned the ball to the only place it could go, impossible for him to return. He led the cheers, the hollers and whistles of celebration. Dashing to my side of the table, he pumped my hand, hugged me furiously, his ear close enough for me to whisper, "Thank you." He turned me over to the crowd as the cheers continued, my name endlessly shouted. My eyes sought Nicole, found her joyous face, hands joined together as if in prayer, eyes half closed as if making herself an offering to me. A moment later, as the crowd broke up, she was suddenly in front of me, radiant, clasping my hand, whispering, "My champion," and leaning so close that her breath was warm on my cheek. "See you tomorrow." But tomorrow was December the 7th, 1941. Okay, Larry lets him win in such a skillful way that it doesn't seem obvious. So the crowd all think Francis won fair and square, and even Francis, it took him half the game to realise what Larry was doing. He has that moment of doubt. Can I trust Larry LaSalle on the final point? God, if he wanted to, we could just start trying now. Hammer me. But no, Larry does let him win. Again, remarkable, it seems, act of self-sacrifice by Larry, just to make Francis's day perfect. When the crowd shout for them to play each other, Larry makes sure that Francis looks amazing in beating him. This guy's perfect. What the heck? And then again he meets Nicole, but again that emotional high is met by a low, because we have that final sentence at the end. But tomorrow was December the 7th, 1941. There's your homework. What happens on December the 7th, 1941? It's important. Did you notice the way it was described then? That's not meant to be creepy, it feels a bit to me. My eyes sought Nicole, found her joyous face, hands joined together as if in prayer. Almost makes us think like her at the start, that the pure Sainte Therese. But then eyes half closed as if making herself an offering to me. It doesn't sound like a saint thing, does it? That sounds more of a sexual thing. So, encapsulating how Francis's view of her has changed, perhaps? Right. It's time to go, I think, chaps. Covered a fair bit today. It's not like me. We're going to start tomorrow with a section which is very useful if you get a question on the effects of war. And so we'll carry on a bit further. But remember, December the 7th, 1941. What happened on that day? That's your homework. I will, as always, leave the music going for a bit. You're more than welcome to ask any questions there, which I can have a look back at. But otherwise, see you tomorrow. Same time, same place. Adios, muchachos.